stories don't define you. How you tell them will. Hi, I'm Sarah Elkins, your host and chief story maker of Elkins Consulting. We share stories for many reasons, to persuade, to entertain, to connect. What we sometimes forget is the impact of the stories we tell ourselves. Whether you're sharing personal stories or business stories, how you share them makes a difference in how you remember them and in how you're perceived by the people you're interacting with. When you figure out which stories to share, difficult bosses and coworkers, successes, failures, the next step is to develop how you share them. Have you figured out your patterns, your roles in those successes, the discomfort and your challenges? In this series, you'll hear stories that will resonate with you. You'll nod your head in understanding, and then we'll dig into the lessons from each of those. How many times have you been sharing a story only to be interrupted by a person eager to share his own? When I'm working with clients on communication skills, I remind them to listen for understanding, not to respond. But during this podcast, I'm asking you to listen and consider your own related stories, to listen and consider which stories in your life might have impacted you in a similar way. What a treat. Today, I get to speak with Liz Stincelli, and we have been connected on LinkedIn for at least 5 years. We've had one phone call in that time, and I saw something she posted the other day, and I just had to ask her to join me on the podcast, Your Stories Don't Define You, How You Tell Them Will. Liz, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me, Sarah. It is great to finally be able to connect with you face to face, in a sense.
In a sense, I love you. It works. I invited you because I've been following your content for such a long time. And I know you haven't been writing posts recently, but 3-4 years ago, you were consistently putting out this great content about meeting management, about training, about really the education of your workforce, the people that you work with. And I was always struck by how approachable you were in your writing. And so it's about time that we got to do this.
Yes.
I always start by asking my guests to share something about themselves that most people wouldn't know about them, something not on their resume or LinkedIn profile. And the reason I ask for this is that I like for our listeners to have a little bit of context about the person who's about to share some interesting personal stories and pivot points. So what do you think?
Well, I guess I'd have to say I'm a closet sci-fi fanatic. We grew up, my father loved Star Trek. We were at the drive-in for every Star Trek movie that came out. And it's something that I still haven't been able to shake even in adulthood. So that is probably something that actually people I work closely with don't even know. So
that's
keep it our secret.
So are you reading a series right now?
I'm not. I had just finished a book, Artemis, which is written now. I can't off the top of my head because I'm trying to think. I can't think of the author, but it's the same man who wrote the movie Mars that had Matthew Damon in it.
Oh.
And it's, of course, a female kind
Artemis. Right. The goddess of the
heroine.
Right?
And it was an excellent book, and I really enjoyed that. So I haven't picked my next one yet.
Oh, I love that. Have you read any of the young adult novels that are kind of steampunk by Scott Westerfeld?
No.
I would highly recommend it. It starts with the Leviathan is the first one of a trilogy. And I listened to the whole trilogy with my family on road trips over the course of about a year. And we actually took a wrong turn. We were driving back from the Oregon coast one time over a spring break and missed a turn, ended up going an hour and a half out of our way.
Wow.
Because we were all so enthralled by this book, Leviathan.
I just wrote it down. I'm going to take a look at it after we get off of this call. So
excellent. I love listening to the young adult novels and reading some of them because they seem, some of them are very dark, but they just don't seem as intense in terms of reality as the adult fiction novels. So I kind of like being taken away from reality for a little while.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. Yeah, the only young adult book I remember reading recently is They Both Die in the End, and I don't
Oh,
remember the author of that one either. Yeah, the title gives it away. It's kind of dark, but kind of
huh.
an interesting read.
Excellent. Well, I definitely would not have known you're a sci-fi fan, and I'm so glad to hear that and learn that about you. That's exciting. Now I know what books to send as gifts. That's funny. Um, so let's get into the theme here, which is we before I hit record, we were just barely talking about how you host trainings in terms of really trying to make them more of a discussion and less of a presentation, which of course I'm a huge believer in that. I love to make them way more engaging than just me yammering at people. So it makes me curious after hearing you say that. It makes me curious about when you kind of discovered that mode, that way of teaching.
Well, this probably stems back from college presentations. Standing in front of a class and giving presentations and really no interaction, and you walk away and you're not sure that anything you shared was of any value to anyone. So, I became certified, a Stephen K. leadership certified coach, and his presentations, it's all stand up in front. I'm going to show you all of this, very little interaction. And it just left me feeling empty. I felt like I was not adding the value that I could add, because I don't know if I'm giving you what you need. I can have a discussion with you about what you're wanting from me. But until I sit down with your employees, your management team, whoever I'm training, I don't know. Many times I don't know if you know what they need.
Right.
So I like to conduct more of a roundtable discussion where we sit down. I'm not standing over you. We're on even terms here. I can learn as much as I have to share. And let's have a discussion, and I come kind of, with an idea about the training we're going to do, but we may go down a whole different road depending on where our conversation leads. I don't want to sit and be preaching to the choir. We all know this is what we do. We think the same way. Then I'm wasting both of our time. So let's sit down and let's create something together. So each training is unique, something that's of value to all of us. And I feel like I walk away a better person from training this way also.
Mm-hmm. It sounds like it makes it easier for people to stop just talking about doing things and actually create some strategies to apply what they're learning.
Well, and I agree. I want you to walk with the training with something you can go implement right now.
Right.
If I just give you, cookie cutter training, that doesn't mean you can actually go apply it out in your workforce or in your home life or whatever it may be, because you may not see how it can apply to what you do. So let's talk about it. Let's tweak it as we're discussing it, and let's give some examples of ways that we can apply it.
Right. And practice. I love that. I love to, when I'm doing a workshop on storytelling, they have to practice. And they have to practice from both sides, telling a story and listening to a story, because then we can get into what does active listening look like, and people can practice that. And I love that you said that. It's so meaningful.
Exactly. And coworkers, other members of your team, they might see it in a way you don't, and they may have some suggestions. Hey, maybe we could do this with it. Maybe we should try this. Maybe you should look at it from this direction. They understand the business and the industry more than I'm going to from, the few hours I'm going to come in and spend.
Right. And they
So
know the people involved too. And they may have some background on certain employees that those employees might not have shared with the person who's their direct supervisor.
exactly.
Yeah.
Well, and you've got people who are gung ho about improving, and they want to improve, and they see the need for it. You've got other people who they don't think there needs to be any improvement. And I recently worked with a company where they refused to. There was one specific person that was an issue, but they kept wanting to do group training to solve the problem
The
of this
one person. Right.
Yeah, they were not willing to stand up and say, we've got this person is the problem.
Right.
So it really became key. I could have stood in front of them and presented for hours on end. That person's not going to recognize that I'm talking to them. But when we sit down at a table and we start having conversations, we're not pointing fingers, we're not placing blame, we're not trying to, but as the conversations go on and this person starts participating in the conversations, then we can start addressing some of the issues in a way that is meaningful to everyone.
Right. Isn't that often the case that the leadership won't deal with the conflict directly in terms of a manager that is really being abusive or abrasive or whatever?
It's
It's annoying.
It's amazing to me. I spoke to them several times trying to get them to understand, let's address the problem, but they seem terrified to do that.
Well, and that's always the question. What are they terrified of? I know I had a former boss that was uncomfortable with directly addressing somebody who was doing something badly. And I think he was afraid of hurting somebody's feelings, which is ridiculous and ironic because this same person was literally bullying. I mean, just this is not a made up word. She was bullying her employees, her staff. She went through 3 different administrative assistants in less than a year because she was so abrasive. And all I could think was, you're worried about hurting her feelings, but do you know how much she's costing you? And you're not worried about the feelings of the people that are working for her that are going to seek counseling because of the abuse they're experiencing from her. It just seems, and I said that to him because, I would. And he just refused to address it. And then when he finally did, he didn't have any consequences for it. He told her that this was a problem, suggested that she needed to work on it, but then didn't have any consequences for if she didn't work on it.
It seems like insanity, but it happens insanity all the time. Mm-hmm. And the sad thing is, one person can have such an effect on the lives of so many people they work with.
Absolutely.
I mean, it can spread like a cancer. It can spread, you're spreading good or bad, one or the other. Which right. Is it going to be?
Yeah. So do you remember the first time you did one of your trainings in that roundtable kind of mode? Do you remember? Because I have some pretty vivid memories of some of those early trainings that I did. Do you remember one in particular that had a big impact on you?
Well, I remember the first one that I decided to try this way. Of course, it felt extremely awkward for me, right? Because I wasn't used to it, and I wasn't quite sure how to help kind of guide the conversation. So it was probably a bomb. It was probably it was probably horrific. But by the end, when I walked away, I thought, even though that was an awkward experience, it was still a more enjoyable experience than standing in front of, a team of people.
Oh, that's interesting.
Now, if you're, giving a keynote speech or something, that's a different story. Of course, you have to handle that differently. But to do training, I walked away and I'm like, that was still more interesting and still more fun than just standing out there and looking at blank faces that half the time, you can tell they just want to pull their phone out and start scrolling through something. You can't tell if they're doodling. You can't. We've talked about this. It's so hard to read people, and even when you're in front of a group, you still can't read them the same as when you're sitting down, engaging them in a conversation where they feel like, they're as much a part of the, problem solving as you are.
Yes.
They're kind of more there as a facilitator. You're not there to solve the problem. You're not coming in to tell them this is what you need to do. Mm-hmm. You're coming in to say, hey, let's talk this through and what's going on and how can we make this better. And so
you walked away from that one. Did you try to do your own little debrief to process what you experienced and work through like what you would do differently the next time?
So after that one, I met with the C-suite management after that to get their feedback on how it went. And they viewed it differently than I viewed it. I didn't come across awkwardly, or at least they didn't admit to me how awkwardly I came across. But they did give me some great feedback on things that they felt like would help. And so since then, I try to take in sometimes some not exactly workbooks, but some things so people can, as we're talking, people can jot down, here's some different sections. I want, if you think of this type of thing, put it in this section, this type in this section. So when we come around and you have a chance to speak, it's not like, oh, I had a thought, but I've forgotten, because I do that all the time. It's like, oh, I had this great idea. What was it? Hopefully it will come back to me. So I've put together a few tools that help them to keep their thoughts straight, which in turn makes my job easier, because then I'm not stuck doing all of the talking and the presenting, because no one can come up with anything to say. They don't have anything to share. They don't have stories to tell, examples to share,
right.
And I think the biggest thing that I learned was you have to make it a safe environment. You have to kind of structure it in a way that people feel safe to speak. Mm-hmm. They don't feel like they're going to be judged. They're not going to be reprimanded. So you have to be very careful about how you approach the conversations, mm-hmm. and how you handle, because there's been conflicts sometimes come up. Sometimes people do start pointing fingers at other people.
Absolutely.
And being able to kind of subvert that. And, that's not what we're here for. We win as a team or we lose as a team. And, it's not about blaming one person. It's about how are we going to work together to fix the problem.
Right. Right. I definitely find that when I bring my own workbooks that I've created, my own materials, people really appreciate it because they go along with what we're talking about. And you're right. They like to jot down the ideas they have that then they can share with the group. Do you remember one of the trainings after that, not necessarily the very next one, but one after that where you walked away going, yes, this is why I've changed this. This is why I know I'm doing the right thing now.
So it was probably when I worked with this client who refused to
address the one person.
Because mm-hmm. really, I thought, if you will not address the real issue, I don't know if I can help you. But let's give it a shot.
Right.
Let's see what happens. And I was very pleasantly surprised at how well it actually went. And this person sat back for a little while. They were not engaging. It was kind of like they were put out to have to be there. But as their team members started talking and sharing their own experiences and coming up with ideas, and we had discussions. Eventually you saw them slowly, get more involved. And by the end, they were all working together as a team, talking together as a team, problem solving as a team. And that is probably when it was like, no, this can work in almost any situation.
Yes, absolutely. Did you have a moment where you're looking around the room where you kind of lean back and look around and you hear their conversations that you kind of could feel and sense that you were in the right place at the right time?
Yeah. And in that instance, once this one person started engaging, and I could have almost not been there at that point. Once they started communicating, I could have almost left. And it's like, this is what you're missing. This is what the problem's been. And this is what you've been missing. And now we see we can do it, and it's safe, and it worked.
It changed everything. I'm imagining, I have this big grin on my face because I'm imagining you sitting in kind of a typical meeting room with big table and like 8 people around the table. And I'm imagining you kind of leaning back and taking it in as you notice the interaction and engagement shift as a result of that one person participating.
It was good. And the funny thing is they kept wanting to do team building activities. This is when they're talking to me, we've got this problem. Maybe we'll all go golfing together. Maybe we'll all go do this together or that together maybe that will fix the problem. That's all fine and dandy, but that's not addressing the problem.
Right.
It's great for your team to get out and do things together, but it's not going to change their behavior in the work environment.
Right.
We have to talk about some serious issues, and we have to talk about some examples and some, experiences of where things are working, where are they not working. Let's decide what's working, what's not working, what do we need to start doing, what do we need to stop doing, what do we need to keep doing, and let's talk it through. I can't tell you. Your team has to come together and make those decisions. Yeah. And once they get talking, it's like, this, you don't need me. This is what you need.
Exactly. I have to say, Liz, I get so discouraged when I'm online and I see these great articles about leadership, about really communicating, improving your communication with your employees. And you see all these amazing resources out there to help us be better leaders, to be better managers, to actually recognize the needs and strengths of our employees. So many resources out there. And it always seems to me that the people reading it are the people who already believe these things. And it's the people like the guy you're talking about that either they think that they're a good manager and so they don't think they need to learn anymore, or they don't care. And there's just no halfway there. So being able to put them in a room like that and have them start talking to each other, I think that bridges that gap where you can then present more resources to that person and say, if you're interested in improving, here's a great article I just read.
Yes, or here's a book, or here's that. Uh-huh. I agree. And I've watched poor leaders and poor managers kind of be rewarded because people, instead of addressing the problem and kind of confronting them, they're coddled.
Right.
And so they think they're doing a great job.
Or they'll promote them to a different division just to get them out of their own.
So you're not helping matters. And I think deep down, we all want to be the best people that we can be.
Yes.
But unless we can admit our shortcomings, we are informed of our shortcomings, and we can admit them to ourselves, we don't know where we need to improve. None of us are perfect. I am far from perfect. So, when I sit there and I watch people, and as I watch the facial expressions, and you can see where they think this does not apply to me.
Right.
You know, I don't know why I'm here. And then slowly, you know, they have a comment here and they have a comment there. And the next thing you know, most of the time, you're always going to have an individual here or there that's like, I don't want to participate in this. This is stupid. This is ridiculous. And it's,
Right.
then I can't help you. And your team members are seeing that you don't want to be part of a team. And
Right.
I can't fix
change
that
that for you.
Nope.
Yeah, I have definitely had that experience quite a few times. What I find fascinating is that I am just now, after 20 years of doing this, I'm just now getting to the point where I stopped paying so much attention to that person. It used to be that would be my challenge person, and I would spend far too much energy trying to change that dynamic than I was spending on the people who were there ready to learn and eager. And I realized what a waste that is to spend that time trying to change one person's mind when you have 20 other people in the room who are totally absorbing what you have to share.
I
and contributing.
agree. I absolutely agree because if they're so set on not participating and thinking that they do not need this training, you're not going to change their mind. And in my opinion, probably down the road, eventually someone in authority will decide we don't need this team member anymore. They're not participating in the team. If they're not going to sit at the table and participate in the team, they're not participating out on the floor as a team. So
what I find really sad, there are two things that I find really sad about that. One is when somebody doesn't address a person that is abrasive or bullying or behaving like that, obviously disengaged, you're not doing them any favors by not addressing it. I mean, for one thing, they are unhappy people. I guarantee that they don't feel like they belong, that they don't feel like anybody supports them. And it's because somebody's not addressing the reason that people aren't supporting you or wanting to be around you. So by not addressing it, you're leaving them in a worse position, worse condition. You're certainly not getting them ready for the next job or the next management experience. But I think even worse is when they tolerate it and coddle it until the person is of retirement age or somewhere near there. And then that person retires and they're just miserable, bitter people because they never got it. No one ever told them, if you want people to hang out with you and you want people to like being around you, be somebody that you would want to be around.
I agree. Or you have the people who they're not told, it's not addressed. They're kind of coddled. Eventually they're fed up and they're terminated and they're confused.
Right.
But what? I thought I was doing a good job. Where did this come from? This came out of left field.
Right.
But have you ever sat down and had a conversation with them? Have you ever given them the opportunity to improve? Have you ever asked them what you can do to help them improve? This is where you're excelling. This is where you're falling short. What can we do to help you improve?
Exactly.
This is where we expect you to be. Let us help you.
Right. Your turnover in your department is unacceptable.
Yeah.
So let's talk about it.
Yeah. What do we need? Now, this is what we're hearing. Let's hear your side of it. We've got to find a way to resolve this issue. But a lot of times they're not willing to have that conversation. And it's just like, okay, we'll just get rid of them. Well, that's not fair to anyone either.
No. I have to say though, one of my favorite experiences in the last couple of years was I was doing a StrengthsFinder workshop, an intro to strengths. It was a half-day workshop with a team that was all remote, but they were together for an in-person retreat and hired me in Montana because people love to have retreats in Montana in the summertime. It's so beautiful there. So I'm pretty busy during the summer doing these. I love it. This experience was interesting because I had all the people, there were a dozen in the room. They had each taken the assessment and had one one-to-one appointment scheduled for after the workshop. And I had only had the one-to-one with the supervisor of this team before the workshop. And she gave me a heads up about some of the dynamics, some of the people that were likely to be less engaged during the workshop because whatever reasons in their strengths or who they are more cynical, or like we said, the people who just aren't going to engage. And I walked in, and one of these people that she had given me a heads up, and it wasn't negative. It was just, it was more observational. That person walked in, and I was handing out their cards that have their top 5 strengths listed on them, that they put in front of them so that everyone in the room can see what their top strengths are as we're having these conversations. And I was going to hand him his card, and there were 4 men in the room. And I remember I was about to ask him his name. And instead I said, I'm not going to ask you your name. Tell me how you got ready to come for this trip. Because he came in from, I want to say, Washington State. And I said, how did you get ready for your trip? And he told me all the details about how he got ready for his trip to come to Montana. And I looked down at the 4 or 5 male names that I had in front of me, and I handed him his. And I said, this is you, right? And he looked at me very puzzled. He said, yes. How did you know? I said, it's all in your strengths. And he sat down, and we got started. And in the first 10 or 15 minutes, he and 2 others in the room absolutely acknowledged that they are, what did they say? They were more cynical. They hadn't bought into this idea of the Strengths Finder. And I explained that this isn't something you buy into. Either you believe it's accurate and you understand where you might be getting in your own way through self-reflection, or you don't think it's accurate. It's not something you buy into. It's not a cult. It's not essential oils, right? I either you believe it works or you don't. And I said, tell you what, give me 2 hours. If in 2 hours in this workshop, you decide this is not going to be applicable for you and you can't find any use for it, I give you permission to walk out and go do something else for the next 2 hours of the workshop, this 4-hour workshop. And he was very smug and crossed his arms in front of him, total body language. He said, okay, deal. And meanwhile, his supervisor looked at me in a panic, like, I can't believe you just gave him permission to walk out. And I looked at her and smiled, trying to comfort her, saying, don't worry about it. At the end of that workshop, we're talking 3 hours into it. We still had 1 more hour. I remember this moment where he leaned back, his arms had dropped into his lap, and he looked at me and he said, can my wife take this?
That's fantastic. That's fantastic.
It was definitely one of those, okay, I am exactly where I need to be. So tell me about that experience, because that's kind of what you had in that room when that guy started to engage with the group. Can you?
Yeah.
That?
So that's like I said, when I went in, I thought, I can't help you. You guys won't address your one problem. You want to treat it as a team problem. You've got a individual problem, but you want me to come in and work with your team. I'm like, this is not going to work. I was the one thinking, this is not going to work, but okay. You want me to come do it? I'll come do it. Sure. I'm making no guarantees here. And I remember watching, and in the beginning, you could tell all of the team members were a little bit leery about saying something that may
set him off, or
so yeah. They were, you could tell they were intimidated by this person.
Yeah, it's a lot of tension in the room.
And so as you said, I kind of ignored that person a little bit because I could tell they were not going to engage. And I got the rest of the team speaking with me. You're speaking with me here, not to them. They started to relax, and they started, then they started even sharing some funny stories and some, went back and forth about a few things. And as I could see, it kind of like the arms went down and they kind of leaned more up to the table. And then that stern look kind of relaxed from their face. And then the first words that, I don't remember what the first words were, but the first time they spoke up, just shock. The whole table just kind of turned and unlocked. And then immediately I had to jump in there so that it was not so obvious. We were all, oh my gosh, he can speak. But as soon as I saw him sit up, pull himself up to the table, and kind of, you could just see that relaxation could just come over his face. Like, I thought, you know what, this might work. We just might get it.
Did you get a chance to follow up with him afterward?
So afterwards, I did go up there several more times and speak to individuals, just spending, I probably spent a half hour with each of them, getting their feedback on how they felt things were going, because they all knew what the problem was.
Right.
So I kind of held off and spoke to him last, because I wanted to see how everyone else felt. And when I spoke to him, everyone had said things had improved, but they were still a little intimidated. They didn't dare let their guard down, because
they didn't trust him.
He could stab them in the back at any moment, because this is what he was known for. So as I started talking to him, it was interesting, because he thought everyone else needed the training.
That's usually the way that goes.
But I did point it out to him that, did you notice at the beginning of our roundtable session, you didn't have much to say. And in the beginning, it was kind of hard to get the rest of your team to talk. I said, you tend to come across as intimidating, whether you're doing that intentionally or unintentionally. And then we talked about how that, without that sense of security, you're not going to have, your team's not going to be working for you. They'll come in and do their jobs, but because they don't trust you, they're not there to support you. They don't care what happens to you.
Right.
You get such better results when we're all working together. We want each other to win. We want all of us to succeed. When we come in and it's just like, hey, you know what? Don't care.
Wish they'd get rid of me.
Just here to do my job. Do not ask me to go above and beyond, because you're not worth it. We want to make our team members to make us look better, and we want to make them look better. We want to work with people who want that same thing.
Right.
We can't win alone. I don't care who you are. You can think you're Superman, Superwoman. I'm sorry. There is no one out there good enough to do it all alone.
Absolutely.
You need other people, and you need the support of other people, and you need them to voluntarily want to support you, not because they're terrified of you.
I like to remind people that even the bad experiences with people in your life, some had an impact and shaped you. So you didn't do it by yourself, even if you're doing it out of spite. You had to spite somebody.
That is so true. That is a true statement. Yeah. And I've worked with so many people who just think, they're the only ones that can do anything right. They're, they've got it all under control. They can do it all. You're not doing it all. If you're doing it all, things are falling through the cracks, and no one even knows what to be watching for, because you're withholding information. It gets so ugly, and it's so strange to me. I don't understand why we want to work like this.
Well, I kind of get it, Liz, because I'm a solo person. When I work, I like to do things myself. And it wasn't until I started doing my No Longer Virtual conference about 4 years ago that I started to realize the gap that was happening. And the gap was this: when I didn't ask somebody for help to do something that I'm not as good at, or something that really isn't in my wheelhouse. I can do it, but it's not something I really enjoy. I'm not going to do it well. When I don't ask somebody to do those things for me, there are two things that happen. One is that they don't get done as well because I don't like doing it. And the other is that I'm not acknowledging somebody for what they do well. And that's the thing, is we are raised in the US particularly to be good at everything. Like, we have to get an A in math, we have to get an A in science, we have to get an A in English. And when we don't, rather than understand that that's not our strength, there are some things we have to learn basic math to survive. But when it comes to my finances, I hired a bookkeeper because they're really good at these things and I'm not. And then this bookkeeper hired me to do some employee training because I'm really good at that and she's not. And being able to acknowledge those differences in what we're good at, it doesn't just build a great team, it builds individuals that know what they're good at and feel valued.
And that's key, feeling valued.
Mm-hmm.
And I can relate, there's a bit of a control freak in me, but I try to surround myself with people who are good at the things that I'm not good at, because it's going to take me 2 or 3 times as long to do it.
Exactly. And it's not going to be fun.
No, and my time is better spent at the things I am good at than spent doing things that I'm fumbling through and they're getting halfway done because I don't want to do it, or
you're
I'm
procrastinating. Yeah. So Ben Walker owns transcription outsourcing in Denver, Colorado, multi-million-dollar transcription company. And he and my brother, Eric Elkins, who owns a social media strategy firm called Wide Focus, also in Denver, they did a session at the No Longer Virtual conference in 2018 in Denver on scaling your business. One thing Ben said that has stayed with me for these years, we're going on to our 4th conference coming up in March, so I'm really excited about that. But here we were in 2018, and Ben said, you started your business for reasons A, B, and C. And if you aren't doing A, B, and C, and instead you're spending your time on D, you're leaving money on the table. And that was February of 2018. It took me until September of 2019 to hire a bookkeeper to do that part D of my business that I was wasting my time doing because it's not what I'm great at. So I was basically leaving money on the table because I was spending time doing that instead of doing what I do.
What you do.
Writing.
The things that make you money.
Right, exactly. The things that make me money. So that was intense.
and every organization and every team needs to kind of do that evaluation. What is each member good at? Make sure you've got the right people doing the right things. Just because they can do something doesn't mean that they're the best one to be doing it.
Right. They may not enjoy it. I'm great at doing laundry. So doesn't mean I want to do it all the time.
So I think that everyone needs to look at that.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Liz, this has been such a treat. I am so grateful that you took the time to visit with me about this.
Oh, you're so welcome. I'm so glad you reached out to me because it's been great to connect with you.
Thank you. For our listeners, I will have a link to Liz's LinkedIn profile on the blog post associated with the podcast. So if you have questions about what she does, feel free to reach out to her. And Liz, do you have anything else you'd like to add before we stop recording?
I don't. Just, hey, everybody, if you have someone out there you've got an issue with, please not doing yourself or them any favors by just tiptoeing around those issues. Let's get them addressed, on your own, get some help, whatever you need to do, because we want great teams.
We do. And like you said, one bad apple.
That's right.
And the whole team is less productive and disengaged and
dreads coming to work. So
dreads coming to
do not
work.
want that.
You don't want that. They're not going to bring their best selves to work.
No. So, but thank you so much for having me, for sharing your stories with me, Sarah. You're always fantastic.
Thanks, Liz. Thank you for listening to Your Stories Don't Define You, How You Share Them Will. Please visit my website for more podcast episodes, blog posts, and information about how I can help you develop and share your stories at elkinsconsulting.com.
Now listen to me, honey, while I say, how could you tell me that you're going away?